Have you ever met someone who just cannot follow rules? Tell them there's a dress code. They show up in whatever they want. Give them a deadline. They'll submit it their way, on their time. Put up a sign that says, "Do not touch," and somehow their hands are already on it. You might think they're just difficult, rebellious, maybe even childish. But psychology says something completely different. Because people who hate following rules aren't broken. They're wired in a very specific way, and once you understand it, you'll never look at them or yourself the same way again. Here's something most people don't know. Most people hear a rule and think, okay, that's just how things work. But for some people, a rule triggers something much deeper. The moment they're told what to do, their brain registers it as a loss of control, and loss of control feels like danger. Psychologists call this psychological reactance. It's an automatic internal alarm that fires whenever a person feels their freedom is being taken away. The rule doesn't even have to be unfair. Just the existence of a restriction is enough to create resistance. So when they break rules, they're not trying to cause problems. Their brain is literally trying to protect their sense of freedom. They have a deep need for autonomy that others simply don't feel as strongly. For most people, following instructions is neutral, maybe slightly annoying, but manageable. For rule-resistant people, being told what to do doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels suffocating, like something essential is being taken from them. Research shows that these individuals have an extraordinarily high need for self-determination. They need to feel like their choices are their own, that their life is authored by them and no one else. This isn't ego, this isn't immaturity. It's one of the most powerful psychological drives a human being can have. And when that drive is constantly blocked by systems, institutions, and authority, the resistance becomes a survival instinct. They don't reject all rules. They reject rules that feel meaningless. They don't live in total chaos. They actually follow plenty of rules. Rules they understand. Rules that make logical sense. Rules they chose for themselves. What they cannot tolerate is blind obedience. The answer, because that's how it's always been done, is not an answer to them. It's an insult to their intelligence. Psychologists find that these individuals tend to have high critical thinking tendencies. They automatically ask why. They need a reason that holds up. And if no good reason exists, in their mind, neither does the obligation to comply. They're not against structure. They're against structure that serves no one. This one is important. Growing up, rule-resistant children are often labeled difficult, defiant, stubborn, a problem. Teachers flag them. Parents exhaust themselves trying to control them. The message they receive over and over is, the way you are is wrong. But psychology tells a different story. Many of history's greatest innovators, artists, entrepreneurs, and leaders scored extremely high on traits linked to rule resistance, because the same brain that refuses to color inside the lines is the same brain that later refuses to accept that something can't be done. The trait itself is not the problem. What happens is the world tries to fix something that was never broken. Schools, corporate jobs, rigid bureaucracies. These environments are built on one assumption, that people perform best when they follow a standardized process. But for rule-resistant individuals, these environments are quietly suffocating. They're not struggling because they're incapable. They're struggling because the system demands obedience as a prerequisite, and their brain refuses to give it. Put the same person in an environment with autonomy, flexible structure, and creative freedom, and they often outperform everyone around them. The problem was never the person. It was the container they were placed in. And finally, their resistance is often a form of self-respect. For many rule-resistant people, compliance feels like surrender. It feels like agreeing to shrink themselves to fit someone else's idea of acceptable. Every time they follow a rule they disagree with, something inside them feels violated, so they resist. Not always wisely, not always constructively, but always because they are trying to stay true to something inside themselves. The irony is that the world needs these people desperately. Every unjust law that was ever changed was changed because someone refused to follow it. Every industry that was ever disrupted was disrupted by someone who ignored how things were supposed to be done. Rule breakers aren't the enemy of progress. In most cases throughout history, They were the engine of it. So the next time you meet someone who can't seem to follow the rules, don't just see the resistance. Look deeper. Because underneath it is often a person who values freedom more than comfort, who needs meaning more than compliance, who would rather burn in their own fire than slowly fade following someone else's instructions. The question isn't whether they can learn to work within systems. The question is, are we building systems working within? If this made you think about someone or yourself, you already know what to do next.